We are live. We are alive, Mike.
Barely.
Not only are we live, we are allegedly alive. He's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman. This is Mind Your Banners for Sunday, December 7th, 2025. Apologies for no late night Mind Your Banners last night. To be honest, the evening got late on us. Mike, I dropped you off around 3:15, and I think you said you weren't planning on going to sleep. I got home at about 4. My kids woke me up at about 8, and I stomped into my older son's room and locked the door and went back to bed for another 2 hours. It's been quite the 24 hours. Indiana, we are not going to talk about the basketball game today, but Indiana.
I kind of forgot that they played basketball for a minute.
I did too, I'll be honest. Indiana with a marathon day in Indianapolis yesterday. They do lose to Louisville 87-78 at Gainbridge Fieldhouse, but of course all anyone's here to talk about is Indiana 13, Ohio State 10, and all the ramifications that come with it. Indiana, the number 1 seed in the playoff. Indiana in the Rose Bowl. Indiana, the number 1 team in the country for the first time in its history. Fernando Mendoza, the heavy odds-on favorite now to win the Heisman Trophy, which would also be a first in Indiana's history. Mike, let's start with the playoff, with the breaking news. Then we will walk backward through the night that was and talk maybe about some potential matchups. Indiana, the number 1 seed, they're in the Rose Bowl, as discussed. That is a tie-in. This is the last year of tie-ins. That's going to go away after this year. But this is, in a way, it almost feels fitting that Indiana got one shot at the Rose Bowl before the whole sort of Big Ten attachment went away. They will play the winner of the 8-9 game, which is Alabama, the 9 seed, at Oklahoma, the 8 seed. That game is, I think you said 4 p.m. New Year's Day. Was that right?
Rose Bowl.
Rose Bowl. If they win, and I was wrong in my prediction of this, they will get the Peach Bowl in the semifinal. The other side of the bracket, the primary sort of teams on the other side of the bracket are number 4 Texas Tech and number 5 Oregon. So I mean, we don't need to thread all the way down to what the semifinal.
I think you carried the lead there too.
And it's true. James Madison, the 12 seed. James Madison, the 12 seed against Oregon, the 5 seed. So if James Madison pulls the double upset, then it will be an IU JMU Peach Bowl, exactly what downtown Atlanta wants on January 9th. But there's a long way to go from here to there, Mike. Listen, Indiana was one of the teams with few surprises. If you have thoughts on Notre Dame, Miami, I'll take them in a minute. But ultimately, the biggest piece of this is just it confirms what we expected, which is Indiana's the best team in the country this afternoon, whatever time of day it is.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was relatively drama. Once they won, and we'll get to the game. We'll talk about the game. Once they won, in terms of like the CFP of it all, it was very drama-free in terms of where they were going. Look, they were locked into the Rose Bowl. They were going to be the number 1 seed. And so you're really looking at matchups. Oklahoma, was kind of locked into the 8. Didn't really make much sense how they would move. Alabama, I was surprised, honestly. I thought they would move Notre Dame up and move Alabama down 1 and kind of bump Miami down out. But obviously, based on kind of their rankings, basically the entire way through almost. But that's not the way they went. So Notre Dame is out. No rematch is possible. But, Oklahoma and Alabama is a rematch of 3 weeks ago they played. But, an SEC team that Indiana sort of lines up against here to make for, a really interesting matchup. Obviously, the storylines with Alabama and Kalen DeBoer and Kurt Cignetti, all ripe. But, Oklahoma's another sort of defensive team that, didn't really have an offense. But, I mean, if you want to talk about a team that kind of mirrors Indiana's success on the defensive side of the ball, Ohio State's, Oklahoma's probably right there with them in terms of like best defenses in the country, right? Kind of carried them through to the CFP. I think it's an intriguing 8-9 matchup that sets up an intriguing Rose Bowl. Probably selfishly with the storylines, you kind of say like Alabama getting through would be there'd be some symmetry to it, especially with Kurt Cignetti being part of this. But what were your thoughts on kind of the, Miami, Alabama, Notre Dame nexus and what they ended up getting there?
Yeah, I mean, on Indiana, first of all, I think I think Indiana would be favored in either game. Oklahoma has an argument. Indiana does too for the best defensive front in the country. As you talked about, though, their offense is just an almighty struggle. The key with Oklahoma, I think, and you sort of saw this in the way they beat Alabama a few weeks ago, is you've got to limit the mistakes you make against them, because they are predatory when it comes to turnovers.
Kind of like Iowa was in the Big Ten, right? For all those years.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was something like, I think Oklahoma was outgained by almost 200 yards in that game against Alabama, and they still won. So that tells you what their defense is capable of. There was a pick six in that game. I think Alabama is probably the more well-rounded team. On the other hand, I think Alabama, frankly, just has, someone on the what?
Hit a wall.
Yeah, someone on the playoff committee said I forget, or not the playoff committee, the ESPN playoff show. I forget the word they used. It feels like Alabama has started to weaken as the season has gone on. Like that, in the first, obviously they had the Florida State loss, but then for the next 5 or 6 weeks, you felt like maybe Alabama was the best team in the country other than Ohio State. We thought Ty Simpson might be the Heisman Trophy winner. You looked at their skill players and their running back Jam Miller, and you just kind of thought like this is maybe not like vintage Saban Alabama, but this is as good as any team in the country, and they just really have not looked like it. And I know there was a lot of catharsis for Georgia in winning that SEC championship game, because Alabama's beaten Georgia like 7 times under Kirby Smart, something like that. But like I think anyone who watched those two teams play in the last maybe 4 or 5 weeks of the season just knew that like the Alabama team that won in Athens earlier this season is not the one on the field now for whatever reason. And I don't think they have like an inordinate number of injuries. I know Miller's been banged up, and I think that changes a lot for them when he's not available. But you also just wonder if maybe that was a team that kind of hit full speed a little bit too soon in the season. Like I said, I think Indiana would be favored in either game. I think there's, maybe something, and I know Kurt Cignetti would brush this off, but I think there's maybe something fundamentally valuable in Indiana beating an SEC team and just sort of putting to rest forever this idea of
well, there's still one of the last, you wrote the article about all the firsts and last, like things that they got to conquer. The bowl streak is there still.
Yeah, that's true too. They haven't won a bowl since 1991. The 91 Copper Bowl.
You covered that, correct?
I did. Actually, I'm putting together a story, I think today, possibly for tomorrow, just sort of a running diary of a lot of people's experiences on Saturday in Indianapolis. And one of them is Greg Farrell, star linebacker for the 1991 Copper Bowl team. So, as for the Miami Notre Dame, I like it. If they had not done any of those ranking shows week after week, and I know I recognize I am absolutely not saying anything you can't hear somewhere else. None of this would be controversial if they didn't do that dumb ranking show every Tuesday, because they would just come out and they would say, these are the rankings and we think Miami's better.
Yeah,
and maybe Notre Dame, maybe you can make an argument for Notre Dame, but Miami won the head-to-head, whatever. Yeah. But instead, you set yourself up in a position where you have to put a certain team a certain place so that you don't box yourself in later on, and then you still just come out with just stuff that has no logic behind it. Like the only really compelling argument, and it's not compelling, but the only argument of frankly any description for moving Miami around in relation to Notre Dame is Duke winning, right? Like that marginally improves Miami's resume, because I believe Miami beat Duke. I mean, that's an incredible stretch. It is the kind of stretch that would rip apart Stretch Armstrong. But like it just you didn't have to put yourself in this position, and you did. And now you are open to, let's be honest, let's just be very fair, criticism of the idea that you found a way to shoehorn an ACC team into the top 10 so that you could put the 2 G5 teams in, because there was no argument for Duke ahead of the 2 G5 teams, at least not for me. And you still didn't piss off any of your Autonomy 4 conferences.
Yeah, no, I meant more, not necessarily to get into that, because that's going to be debated, I think, for like 3 hours on ESPN right now, but more just the idea in terms of Indiana's perspective, what might have been a more attractive matchup for the fans. I think really Notre Dame and Alabama were like sort of the two options like that were head and shoulders above the rest. I think a rematch against Notre Dame on a neutral field would have been just a super sort of compelling game, considering what happened last year, how they found redemption against Ohio State, and the idea of getting redemption against Notre Dame, and to sort of exercise that to sort of conquer the state. I think that would have been a very compelling matchup. I think Alabama is equally compelling. So I don't think the fans will be that upset in terms of what they get. I mean, obviously Oklahoma can win, but I'm just talking about in terms of the matchup. The one thing I will say about, because I think we should make this Indiana focus about the bracket. The other observation I had is the respect that the committee had for Indiana by dropping Ohio State only one spot, instead of dropping them. Georgia had a nice, solid win against Alabama. It was one-sided enough where I thought, who knows what they decide to do. But no, Ohio State only drops to 2. I think it would have been interesting to see what the reverse would have been, because I think it should have been the same. If Indiana had lost that game, they shouldn't have moved down outside of the top 2. But I think that shows that the committee really respects, because look, we've talked about it all season. Their strength of schedule, beyond just being undefeated, their strength of schedule is there. All the metrics are there. And so not only are they getting respect for themselves, but like the teams they lose to are not being punished. And that goes to like the strength of schedule metric they tweaked. Like quality losses don't hurt you, which is why Alabama's in their situation, why Ohio State didn't drop down. And now Indiana's in a position where they are on the other side of the metric. They are the team beating teams, and not and other teams are getting credit for just losing to them closely. That's how far you've risen up, I suppose.
I think the last thing I would sort of sound off on too is I said I thought Indiana would get the Fiesta Bowl, and I suspect Indiana did not want the Peach Bowl because of the danger of meeting an SEC team in Atlanta. It's worth pointing out via this bracket that's not possible.
Right. Yeah, that sort of went on.
So you don't have to worry about that. That you get the Peach Bowl, which, listen, Indiana, I think this is kind of a best of all worlds. Atlanta is much closer to Indiana. There are a ton of IU alums in Atlanta. There are a ton of IU alums in Nashville. There are obviously cheap flights to Atlanta from Indy, from Chicago, from New York, etc. And I know Indiana needs to get there first. Please understand. Like, we're just talking about, potential paths, etc. But the one big danger of Atlanta was having to face a Georgia or an Alabama or maybe even like an Ole Miss in Atlanta. Now you don't need to worry about that. So John Jacobs says, shame on me for not picking IU. Was it John who said back in the preseason, I think it was John, that this season would be a disappointment if Indiana did not beat at least one of Oregon or Penn State?
They both. But wait.
Is John actually Kurt Signetti?
One point about that with the Fiesta Bowl, the travel would have been challenging to do the Rose Bowl and Fiesta Bowl back to back. And so you also avoid that. Obviously, 2 West Coast trips separated by 4 days, 3 days. And they're coming back. I don't think they're staying out there. And so that would have been a big challenge. And now they avoid that as well. With the Peach Bowl on January 9th, if they were to get past the semifinals, and obviously one of James Madison, Oregon, or Texas Tech.
Should we talk about the game?
I mean, we can if you're done on your phone. Every time I talk, you just start checking your phone. It's rude.
I just don't want to talk to you. That's the issue.
I mean, we spent a lot of time together, but you should.
We have spent a lot of time together. We were riding shotgun last time. Well, you were riding shotgun. I was driving, but it was fine.
You were riding shotgun as well. You were just.
I tell you what, it got hairy there for a minute, going down 69 at 3:00 in the morning when no one was behind the wheel. You look like you had other business.
No, you said let's talk about the game, and then maybe pay attention now. It'll be exciting.
Indiana 13, Ohio State 10. We can take this in a lot of different directions. This was not a mirror image of the Oregon game, but I thought played out in a lot of the same ways, just with fewer points because both teams are better defensively. Fernando Mendoza probably has his Heisman moment. Charlie Becker was really, really good. The Indiana defensive line might be the best in the country. I don't know where you want to start with this, other than just
that's interesting. Like I don't think. I mean, the defensive line played good. I don't know if it played like the best. Like they were getting, they schemed up a lot of that pressure. That was impressive.
Yeah.
Like it was disguises and
I think they always have. I mean, I don't.
Well, the linebackers were. I mean, I think when you looked at the defense, if you were to say like your biggest takeaway, like the linebackers played out of their mind. Elijah Hardy, Isaiah Jones, Aiden Fisher. I mean, most of the key plays, most of the key moments, they were the ones kind of coming through. Hardy had the pass breakup in the end zone on the third down before the missed field goal. Isaiah Jones had a pair of sacks and kind of key moments. Hardy had another sack at midfield that helped force a punt. I just thought they, just were dominant. I mean, the Jones is one sack where he chased down Julian Sand. He's lined up on the opposite side. Sand runs, rolls out, and he has to chase him down all the way to the sideline, and he still gets him. It was probably one of the more impressive plays of the game. Just defensively, Mendoza obviously is the MVP, and I think that's a shame, not to take anything away from Mendoza's performance, but just because, and I don't, the defense didn't really have an individual standout. It was more of a team thing. I just really thought they just haven't gotten the credit all year they deserve. And, they came into this game, I think, feeling like they were in the shadow of Ohio State, because Ohio State, like, edged them out in almost every statistic, except, maybe one or two. People were talking about Ohio State being like historically great. And Indiana had earned respect, but not that level of respect. And I think they felt that. And, they left Lucas Oil Stadium as sort of the champs, right?
I think someone a long time ago said to me that the difference between offensive football and defensive football is that offensive football is about scheme and defensive football is about talent. And obviously those are oversimplifications, but I think you are onto something in the sense that we tend to want to talk about offensive football through the lens of like players' individual skills and talents meeting these brilliant schemes. And when you look at, like, when you see people breaking down film of a quarterback or something, they're always quick to talk about the quarterback's talent, but also, the coordinator drew something up really great from here. Whereas, and listen, I think there is truth in that statement that offense is about scheme and defense is about talent, because defense is in football, a defense is at a natural disadvantage. They don't know what's supposed to happen at the snap of the football. The offense does. And so you have moments like, Caden Curry was great last night. For me, the best player on the field is Caleb Downs. Like, he had 2 or 3 moments where I just thought, oh my God, like there was the one that really sort of stood out to me was when Kalon Black found a lane on the left side, bounced to the outside. And any other Big Ten, any other team Indiana's played this season, that's a touchdown. And Caleb Downs just ran him down.
Well, it might be like 120 teams in the country that's a touchdown.
Yeah, like Caleb Downs just ran him down like it was nothing. Like Caleb Downs almost looked like he had to slow down because he realized he was about to overrun Kalon Black. And so I think we tend to think of defense through the defense through the lens of just individual talent. And because of that, I think we tend to think about defense a little bit more still through the lens of, recruiting rankings and stars and sort of all-American nods and things like that. I think it is still, even in this sort of like we've come up with all these analytics, and there are some people, especially in the NFL draft space, that do a wonderful job breaking down film and breaking down player tendencies and skills and things. But I think it is still a lot easier for us to talk about offensive football, offensive players as a function of both talent and scheme than it is defensive players for a variety of different reasons. Some of that is just like the culture in the sport. Some of that is just the nature of the sport, right? Like, it's easier for a quarterback to have a remarkable impact on a game than it is for like a linebacker. Listen, if Ohio State had won, my vote would have been for Caden Curry for player of the game. So like, we're saying all that, like, it is possible. And I think 2 years ago, I think a defensive player won it from Michigan, Mike Sandristle, I think, won player of the game.
Well, I'm just saying they didn't have enough.
But I agree with you that, like, in general, I don't think the appreciation is there for Indiana's defense. And I think it's in part because it's a little bit easier for us culturally to take the lightly recruited, 3-star who had 2 or 3 Power 4 offers but got into the right system and scheme and strength program in college and turned out to be an All-American running back or an All-American quarterback or whatever, I think it's a little bit easier for us to process that story than it is to process what we're seeing on the defensive side of the football for Indiana, which is, if you look over there, it is literally a bunch of dudes that were 0 and 2 and 3-star prospects that were going to G5s, that were going to prep schools. Elijah Hardy was going to the Naval Academy, all that kind of stuff. I just think we're not quite conditioned to manage that the way that we are offense. And I think that's why the defense unfairly doesn't get the credit you're talking about.
Well, I think maybe you will. I don't know how the voting for the Broyles Award works, but if Brian Haynes isn't the winner, they should probably just do away with it. I mean,
I think it's awarded after the season, isn't it? I think
it's awarded after the season. I don't know when the voting. I don't know when the voting's due. Right? Like, yeah.
I'm not sure I've ever voted in it, so I don't know who does.
Yeah, I don't know who does or when it's done. So I'm just saying, but like, if the voting body got to see that work of art by his sort of signature performance, I think you'd say that this is the best coordinator in the game right now. And he's on Indiana's sideline. And to your point, like the talent obviously stood out. I mean, D'Angelo Pons had a couple of rough moments against Jeremiah Smith, but his point was after the game, like, look, Jeremiah Smith's going to get his, but you just have to kind of keep him in front of you. And the only time he didn't once, and he admitted it, he kind of screwed up, tried to play him how he shouldn't, but then like everything else was in front. Everything else in the defense was in front. I think they only allowed one play over 20 plus yards. A couple were at 20 yards, but only one play more than 20 yards. That was that big throw to Jeremiah Smith. Only allowed obviously 58 yards rushing. Had more sacks, 3 at halftime than Ohio State had given up all season. Finished with 5, which was 1 less than Ohio State had given up all season total.
Yeah.
I mean, that's astounding, right? 11 pressures per Pro Football Focus, double digits for only like the 4th time. Take that for what you will. Obviously, some people don't love the site, but I mean, it kind of gives you a baseline. And I just thought, obviously they had the 2 long drives, 12-play drive and 15-play drive that end up with no points. They were gassed too. I mean, we talked about kind of, especially the second one. They overcame that, and it was just a really impressive. Either of those ending points, I mean, it changed the complexion of the game, especially a touchdown. But like, man, like to shut out Ohio State in the second half. I mean, that's it, right? That's right. And Aiden Fisher talked about that. You were in the press conference. Like, we don't let him score a touchdown, we win here, right? Or I mean, just in the second half, we win.
Somebody asked about Omar Cooper. We don't have word on him. We will talk to Kurt Signetti later today. I imagine we'll get something from that. I don't know, John, forgive me, if this will be the 203-minute podcast. We got a lot of ground to cover today.
Oh, because we got a conference call at 3 with the college football playoff, and then
Signetti's doing a Zoom at 2, and then we're talking to Signetti again at 4. So
we're doing a Zoom at 2 now?
Yeah, with the Rose Bowl. So it's an exciting time.
That's good. That means he's not going to be in a great mood for the 4 o'clock.
No, he's not. There's not word on Cooper yet, but I suspect we'll have something. I will say this, like, and listen, it's hypotheticals. I've played a lot of hypotheticals in the other direction with Indiana football down the years. If Ohio State has one more drive in that game, I suspect Ohio State wins. Indiana's defense was gassed. Like really gassed. And I think that is less sort of I mean, listen, we've talked about like, they've got we've talked about how they don't rotate a ton and they've had some injuries and so forth. That's also just like reflective of that game. Like that's just like, that was a bruising, physical, demanding football game. I think there is always going to be this question of whether or not you want the bye. Do you want the extra, 10 days, 9 days, whatever it is, of layoff, or would you rather play basically 2 weeks after the conference championships? I think this team needs the bye. I think this team,
did you see? I mean, I don't know if you saw all the guys limping. Like Pat Coogan was limping. Like, I mean, like,
yeah, like,
and again, guys on the front line.
That's a function of a game like this. I understand that.
No,
some of that is just that playing Ohio State is so physically demanding. But whatever rust accumulates on Indiana here in the next 4 weeks, like they need this time off.
Well, because they're
to get
not
fresh, to get healthy.
And we've talked about this, where the recruiting is at, where the gap is the depth. Whereas Ohio State can survive a lot of that. Georgia is in that category. Oregon's in that category. That's probably it for the playoff. I mean, these teams are good, but none of them have those depths as that those like top three teams. And Indiana's already taxed. I mean, we can get into it a little bit, but like the offensive line, they replaced 2 starters. Obviously, Cooper went out, and so Charlie Becker's playing. Jonathan Brady's playing. Like when those things happen, they add up quickly. Like Daniel Ndukwe had to play kind of key snaps down the stretch. And it's really hard to win against these top level teams when you're on backups, when you've got some guys, Kellen Wyatt, somebody mentioned him. I mean, you're already down, 1/3 of your defensive defensive end rotation. You don't have anywhere else to go if Kamara's done, and it's just really hard for Indiana. So this 3 weeks is absolutely crucial.
Talking about the offense, I mean, listen, Fernando Mendoza was not perfect. I did think, and Sand wasn't bad either. Sand was 21 of 29 for 258, a touchdown and an interception. Probably a little bit more at fault for his interception than Mendoza was for his, although Mendoza might have been telegraphing that play. I don't know. By the way, it's not pass interference behind the line of scrimmage. That's why Ohio State was allowed to play it the way they did. I did think, and I thought this, Kurt Cignetti talked about this in the postgame press conference. I thought this was true of Indiana more generally. But I thought Mendoza looked like a player who'd been hit a little bit more this season. Like he looked a little bit more okay with it, basically. And listen, Sand is, good on those last 2 drives that you talked about that I think gained about 150 something yards between them.
Lasted 15 minutes.
Yeah, like if they punch one in, if they convert that 4th down, if they make the field goal, maybe it all turns out differently. I don't know. But like Mendoza's performance, I felt like sort of epitomized an Indiana performance that reminded you one of the things we asked about going into this game, which is Indiana's been in these moments before and Ohio State hasn't. And does that make a difference? And, last night was the first time all season Ohio State had trailed in the second half. Like that, like they had never been in that kind of peril. And yet on the other side, you had, Mendoza thinking, well, I've thrown a pick in a big game before. I've rallied to come back from it. It's not a problem. I thought it was, first of all, I thought Indiana's offensive line was very good as the game went on, and they chopped and changed a lot, and some of that seemed like it was performance, maybe some of it was for health, but like they were switching guys around more than they have really all year. And as that game wore on, I think Mendoza came to realize he had more time than he thought he did, and he stayed true to pushing the ball down. That was one thing I thought Indiana was really intent upon doing, was showing Ohio State they would push the ball downfield, like really making it clear to Ohio State, like, we are not afraid to test you deep. And they missed a couple times, and then they got the pass interference, and then he hits Charlie Becker for the 51-yarder that eventually sets up the touchdown. There's going to be, I think, some criticism of if he wins, which at this point, and I'll check the odds here in a second.
Minus 5,000.
Yeah, it's like pretty much. Like Vegas thinks it's over. Fernando Mendoza's won the Heisman Trophy. If there will be some criticism of him as a Heisman winner. I get that. I understand that. But if you were comparing him to his peers this season, I think it is very hard to watch a game like last night and just sort of say that dude is not making as many winning plays as anybody in the country. And he had help. Surratt makes a great catch for the touchdown. Charlie Becker was once again incredible. But I feel like, for all that, there are moments when Mendoza, struggles with the cold or, has trouble with the pass rush or whatever. You still see why Indiana's 13-0, because that guy's behind center, basically.
But it's symptoms of him only being having like a one full season before this under his belt. He's not like and Chris Cignetti talked about maybe sort of having his I don't know exactly his high school history, but like a shorter history too in preps. One correction, just so we're clear, they did not rotate on the offensive line. I believe they just switched them out.
Yeah.
Just so people are clear, like Johnny came in for Lynch, which was on the opposite side he had been playing at, for Drew Evans, who did get the start. And then Zen, who was at right tackle. came out. And Zen and Bray Lynch came out. I think it was Bray Lynch with the holding, and Zen gave up a sack. And then they immediately got pulled after each of those plays, and Benson finished out the game. And the protection in the second half, I don't believe they gave up a sack in the second or after they made the changes, basically. And so the protection did get better. And to your point,
they didn't give up a sack, and I don't think they gave up a tackle for loss in the second half.
They didn't.
They gave up 3 sacks in the first half, and I think all 4 of the TFLs they allowed were in the first half too.
But to your point about the explosiveness or trying to get explosive plays, they went away from that, I felt like, in the losses last year, where they just
100%, like 100%.
And this year they said, no, we have to hit one of these. They went deep early. Cooper gets hurt. They keep going back to it, even when they lose their guy, right? And a lot of that's probably because Becker stepped up in a way this season, the last 4 weeks, to show they have confidence in him. But like, I thought, if you're looking for differences from like lessons learned by the coaching staff and not, the players, because, Kurt and I talked about how they weren't ready for the moment. Like, I thought that was sort of the difference, because they needed the Kalon Black run. They needed those 2 big throws, the 30-yarder to Becker and the 50-yarder to kind of set up the touchdown and to run the clock out. Like, those 3 plays, I think, were like the difference in the entire game, really. Like, you weren't going to get a ton against Ohio State. You weren't going to be able to put together a ton of drives. They had one extended drive that went 80 plus yards. That was the difference. Was the difference of how they coached the game last year. And I think you mentioned this maybe on Twitter. I don't know. X. Ryan Day coached not to lose. Kurt Cignetti coached to win. And I think that was also a difference between those games last year, where Kurt Cignetti was himself, went forward on a key 4th down at midfield. Obviously, goes to run out, third, was it the 3rd and 6, threw the ball with Becker.
They threw it on 3rd and 6. And they went for it too. Like they picked, let's put it this way. And this is one of those areas where, like, I'm not criticizing Curtis Rourke. Like, Curtis Rourke had strengths Fernando Mendoza doesn't have. I think part of the reason they get away from throwing it deep in those games last year is Rourke doesn't have the deep ball Mendoza does. Like, Mendoza has the accuracy deep that, like, one of the knocks on Rourke was his strength pushing the ball down the field.
Yeah, Mendoza, but I thought that he said that wasn't a problem, because like his numbers showed he didn't have a problem there.
And in that moment, on 3rd and 6, and you and I were on the field, and we couldn't see it great, but we could see it. They go to what works for them. Like that goes back to kind of the idea of like how many times did you say in the offseason, Ohio State, Notre Dame, they went away from stuff that worked. Like they went, like they coached themselves away from what had worked all year. In that moment, they don't do the percentage thing. They go for what they think works, which is their quarterback pushing. I mean, because that was like a 20-something yard gain. Their quarterback finding single coverage and pushing the ball downfield on a back shoulder throw. Like, they say, we're going to win the game the way that we win games. And
well, they didn't pick like a half measure. Like, you go for it, but you don't worry that you're going to lose the ball.
I use this comparison a lot, not maybe talking about IU football, but when people bring up that godforsaken Super Bowl to me, and they talk about how Atlanta was still throwing the ball in the 4th quarter, and I say, listen, Atlanta was one of the most prolific passing offenses in NFL history that year. That's how they won games. They were sticking to what worked. It just stopped working. Okay. But I would rather die with what got me where I am than, as you say, picking half measures and compromising. And like I said, in that moment, if you're Indiana, yes, it's 3rd and 6. So, like, there's an extent to which, if you just run like a dive into the line, it's not going to accomplish anything. But if you're Indiana, in that moment, you say, who's the best player on the field? The ball's in his hands. What's the best thing he can do? Push the ball down the field. That's what we're going to do. We're not going to run like a slant. We're not going to run a tunnel screen. We're not going to run something
QB draw,
just trying to get 7 yards when we need 6. We're going to run what works for us.
But I think
that John, was pronounced. I mean, against an offense that had goal to go at one point and did not have Jeremiah Smith on the field.
Could you put John Jacobs' comment on the screen?
Yeah,
because this is more slander against Curtis Rourke. Curtis Rourke, PFF, throws deep, 20 plus yards, 24-52, 796 yards, 9 touchdowns, a passer rating of 91.4, 16 big-time throws. Fernando Mendoza, 18 of 44, 524 yards, 5 touchdowns, a passer rating of 79.3, and 12 big-time throws. With one more game.
Better.
So Mendoza is.
I'm sorry. No, all right. Give me your stats. Someone tell me right now in the comments if they think that Curtis Rourke was better against elite teams attacking down the field than Fernando Mendoza was.
I think that's an incomplete because I don't think he was given the opportunity. They went away from it. They did it. And maybe it was because I didn't trust him. I don't know. But he did not get the opportunities against Notre Dame or Ohio State in that fashion. And his offensive line.
I mean, that's a pass protection. Like, we've talked about this all year. That's a pass protection thing, too. Like, that's where.
I was just going to say, his offensive line failed.
Yeah, like every neutral observer, I listen to, to shout out a couple other podcasts. I try to listen to what national people think sometimes because it gives you a different perspective when you're not like micro analyzing every little thing. And I listen to the Cover 3 podcast over at CBS. I listen to College Football Inquirer with my friend Stephen Gottfried and Ross Dellinger and Andy Staples. And like one of the most just fundamental observations that has been made nationally about this Indiana team is that, and Mark says Rourke's throwing hand was never the same after that injury against Nebraska. That's probably true too. One of the most fundamental observations made about this Indiana team from a national perspective is just they are much better along the lines of scrimmage. And you and I can sit here and say, well, we watch every single snap and right tackle's a problem or left guard is a problem or they don't have enough depth here or whatever. But in the aggregate, somebody who is just trying to watch a game without all of that background and minutia and just say, how good is this team, is looking at Indiana a year ago against elite teams and looking at Indiana this year against elite teams and saying they can muck up the line of scrimmage defensively much better than they could a year ago when they were already pretty good, but they weren't this good. And they can protect so much better. I mean, like, if anything, like I said this earlier, I thought Mendoza needed to calm down last night at one point because I just think he didn't expect to have as much time as he did. Like, he got hit a couple times early, and so I get that maybe that kind of gets in his head, speeds up his timing, sure. But there were a few times when he got back there and he looked much more rushed than he really was. And I think as that second half wore on, well, it wasn't like his pocket was clean all the time. I thought he got a little bit more confident in the idea that, like, I'm going to have some time here because this group is giving me cleaner pockets than maybe what I expected. And
did you rewatch that? Did you rewatch the hit that he took on the first play?
Yeah.
Brutal.
Yes. And I mean, by the way, it's a clean hit. Like there's no targeting there. No nothing. He hit him up right around the chest. Did you see what Signetti said? Signetti said that he didn't see it because he was watching.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I thought, yes. Yeah.
And he didn't realize until somebody buzzed through the headset. And he said he was like, oh, boy. But
I actually wrote a story about it, so I did read it.
Yeah. But Mendoza was basically just like, there was no chance. Like he said after the game, he goes, I know this sounds corny. I know people roll their eyes at it, but like I would die out there on the field for my team.
Well, I think people are worried because like he didn't move, so you just assumed it was concussion. And so without seeing the replay, you assumed he got hit in the head. He's done, and it's automatic because once you get a concussion, you're done. No, that was a very violent hit, and it was very impressive in terms of like he's proven time and time again. This is what look, you try to prop him up by slandering Curtis Rourke. I don't think that's necessary. I will say this about Mendoza, and you say I'm hard on Mendoza. I think the toughness he's shown in key moments, almost at every turn, like the hit he took going out of bounds at Iowa. The Penn State game is probably the most notable games in terms of like where you talked about the offensive line, in the aggregate has played better. That might be the game that's an exception. Like in that second half, especially, he was getting just mauled, right? And in I think the throw before the toe tap, he just got annihilated. And he's gotten up every time. I think he's mainly missed maybe 3 snaps because he had to stay down on the field a couple of times and he had to come out and then come back in. But I mean, if you want to talk about toughness, you want to talk about something that's defined sort of his season. We talked about kind of his numbers aren't like Joe Burrow's, obviously, or anywhere even in the realm of on the same planet. But I mean, if you're giving a Heisman to sort of like MVP, sort of like a award like that, I mean, those are the moments you look at beyond just like the game-winning throws and like that. Like those resonate in the locker room. I think it resonates when you hear kind of like the players talk about him, and certainly Curt Cignetti. I think I think if you go back and listen to Kurt Cignetti talk about Mendoza in the spring or even the fall, and then listen to talk about now, there's a marked difference. And I think it's those moments that he's seen what Mendoza is willing to give up, what he's willing to put on the line. And Kurt Cignetti respects football players, and he respects Fernando Mendoza. And he didn't know him right in the spring. It wasn't because he just didn't know. And so when he saw him under fire and he saw how he reacted, I think those are sort of like where you see it, and you sort of say, like, this guy's got total command of this offense. And whether the numbers are, he's not a 5,000-yard passer, that doesn't matter. He's going to win games, and that's why they're in the situation they're in. But I don't need to slander Curtis Rourke. He was great.
He was there last night. We saw him.
He was.
Mike Kadick was there. There were quite a few recent.
CJ West was there.
Who?
CJ West.
Yeah, CJ West. I thought at one point I saw Jalen Walker, but I'm not positive.
I think they showed Mike Kadick on a couple times.
Yes, Mike Kadick was most certainly there. I mean, I think we have to try to, as we kind of come to a close here, because we do have this Zoom with Kurt Cignetti in about 20 minutes. Try to sort of put a bow on what this means. One of the advantages of my sleeping audible this morning was that I got away from my phone because I did not bring it into the 7-year-old
family.
I got back to my phone, and I think I had something in the range of about 24 text messages that were mostly from, and it's different. I went to Indiana.
Humble brag.
Yeah, you're right. No one has ever received 24 text messages in their life.
Did you win the Heisman yourself?
Yes, I did. But you're not supposed to reveal that until next Saturday. You broke the Heisman voting rules. No, I just and it was mostly from people who were just deliriously happy, and the overriding sentiment was exactly what you'd expect, which is just, I never thought this was possible. And I think they meant obviously winning the Big Ten, but I think they meant winning it like this: 13-0, beating number 1 Ohio State, winning it in Indianapolis. There was, I think maybe the most optimistic person could have convinced themselves, maybe that somebody will have a down year, somebody will be on probation, and we'll get a shot, and the Big Ten West is terrible, and if we just get through, we'll win the game. I think there was something very symbolic to IU fans about doing it this way, is kind of my point. That it was 12-0. It was against, a legitimately difficult Big Ten schedule. It was with multiple quality road wins. It was with multiple signature moments. It was with a well-rounded team. It wasn't, it wasn't the some kind of cardiac journey of a team that couldn't score but was dominant defensively, or a team that was winning every game 56-45. And then that the crowning moment was coming from behind to beat the reigning national champion Ohio State Buckeyes, number 1 in the country, to complete a 13-0 season. There were a lot of tears. I'm sure you saw this too on that field last night. Happy tears, joyful tears. Kurt Cignetti said on the podium, he said, I've got 3.5 weeks to get these guys humble and ready for the Rose Bowl. I think Indiana fans could be allowed a night, though, to just breathe this in and just sort of say this is something that will never get taken away from us ever.
Well, Tyreek Tucker had a fun way to say that. He said you can never get fat and hungry. So
tell him I've tried.
In terms of moments, I guess one that stood out that's kind of resonated on social media that I posted was Mark Deal celebrating. And if fans don't know, Associate Director for Alumni Relations, I believe is his exact title.
Yeah, Mark is basically just the keeper of IU football. That is essentially his job. His dad played for IU. He and his brothers both played for IU.
But his dad played for the 1945 team. His brother played for the 1967 team. And so, if there's somebody that has a sense of what the hill that they've had to climb, and sort of the heartbreak that they've experienced from inside the tent as well, it's him. And sort of seeing him celebrate and point to the crowd I mean, those are the moments that, these are things are all about. And I did get a chance to talk to Pam Whitten briefly after the game. She was exiting the stadium after kind of visiting with the players in the locker room. And she talks about the thing that, from an administration standpoint, that the idea that this connects all generations of fans and connects, the students with all that have come before them in a way that nothing else does. No other sport does. No, there's nothing like this. That's kind of a unifying force. And so I think you saw that. The players had a nice moment where they led the whole stadium in the fight song.
I thought that was funny because, like,
I hated it, right? Like 3 years ago.
So the PA announcer played Queen because everyone plays Queen, and like it just kind of played. Nobody reacted, whatever. Then the announcer played "Small Town" by John Mellencamp. Like it felt like they were trying to create a moment, like the PA system, and like justifiably. I'm not criticizing them, but it felt like they were trying to create a moment. And again, there was just like I think there was just too much like delirium, too much happiness, whatever.
I don't think a lot of those kids know Small Town either.
There were a lot of adults there though that do, and still like nobody was singing. It was when Aiden Fisher says like my Heisman has something he wants to do. He called him my Heisman, and like when they got the whole stadium singing the fight song, like that was the organic moment when you felt like everyone was sharing in that joy together.
There's nothing, but there's nothing like that.
No, there's not. And can I share you my Mark Deal quote? Because I quoted him in my story.
Oh, there you go. Go ahead.
He said, "Finally, the third deal to win a Big Ten championship." And I didn't get the full quote, so I didn't include it in my story. But he said, "I can finally sit at the adults' table."
That is right. But no, that was sort of my main takeaway. And then obviously for the players, I mean, you saw all the individual moments. Players seeking out their parents, and obviously it was an emotional scene, kind of with Fernando Mendoza and his parents. His mother is obviously battling an MS, just a wheelchair. She got brought down to the tunnel, and obviously Alberto got to kind of celebrate with them, and that was a very emotional scene. So you see all of that, and obviously all the JMU players. You didn't get to talk to as many of them. Tyreek Tucker, Jangela Pons were sort of in that auxiliary room. And they talked about just it being a surreal journey with like the core of that defense in particular. Obviously, they've got guys on the other side of the ball, Kalen Black, Elijah Surratt, but just that journey that they've kind of taken together, it has been quite a wild one. And so that story on top of everything, not just only the success, but you mentioned kind of 0 stars before. I mean, look, I did a story before, and I think we'll do it again, probably for maybe the quarterfinals or the semifinals, at least in terms of like roster comparison. This was a roster with 8 starters that had 0 stars. I mean, that's got to be unprecedented.
And I think it's probably, we've talked about this in a lot of different ways. I tried to get Curt Cignetti to reflect. I said, like, have you had a moment? And he said, I think I'll have a moment here in a minute when I leave this press conference.
Well, Tyreek Tucker said in the locker room, he's like, you guys have done an awful lot of celebrating already, so you probably got it out of your system.
I think it's validation too for his staff. A lot of these guys at various points in their careers bet on Cignetti, continued to bet on Cignetti. The ones that stuck with him, even somebody like there was a moment, and I'm not trying to turn this into something overly emotional, but like Bob Bostad had a really emotional moment I saw on the field with his family. Indiana's offensive line coach, who obviously has been around college football for a long, long time. I don't know if he's ever been on a staff of the number 1 team in the country.
Be careful.
I don't know I assume he's probably won at least one Big Ten title because he was at Wisconsin for so many years. But Bostad came to Indiana to work for Tom Allen. He was the only holdover when Curt Cignetti got the job. He is, You're right about Brian Haynes winning the Broyles Award, but like if there is an unsung hero Broyles Award, like a guy like Bob Bostad probably should be.
I don't believe that exists.
I'm going to make it up. I mean, you already ruined the Heisman voting, so I'm just going to start making up.
Well, I didn't realize, so I took a video. I thought I was getting this nice video. It was a very nice video of Brian Haynes holding his baby. Did you see this?
No.
And he almost fumbled him or her.
I mean, if you're a parent, you've done that though. Like,
but in the Big Ten celebration, it would have been kind of awkward.
It's fine. I don't know. Why'd you need to bring that up?
I felt bad. I thought I was still taking a nice moment, and then people were like, "Oh, nice catch," and I was like, "Whoops!" I was trying to say it was nice.
All right, we should close this down because we do have quite a lot to get to here in the next 3 or 4 hours. There's going to be a lot more to come. IndyStar.com/sports, HeraldTimesOnline.com, IndyStar TV Hoosiers. I mean, just everywhere. Mike and I are obviously covering a lot of ground. The Rose Bowl.
We should say, I know you don't do it because you're kind of above the people, but what has been nice throughout the season.
Above the people. Okay. Mr. I don't even drive anywhere. I make Zach come pick me up and drive me everywhere.
I tip a chauffeur. But I mean, it's like the last couple of weeks I've been all over the place. I was even in Minnesota for a brief jaunt, and all the listeners and readers that have said hello to us has made it's been a joy. And we appreciate it very much so. You're, putting your hard-earned dollar to read the paper or read online or just follow us on social media. It means a lot, and we really appreciate it, especially with all the interest in this team and stuff. It's fun to have and know that you guys are all out there. Zach, I can't speak for Zach, but that's from me.
I'm the People's Sports Reporter.
It's not what they call you.
That's not what they call you either.
It's People's in quotes.
Indiana. I covered a basketball player at Notre Dame once named Jonathan Peoples. Maybe that's what they mean.
Derek, did you know? I forgot.
His nickname was Everyday Peoples.
Did you know? Because I forgot they played yesterday. They also played Penn State this week basketball.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
Did you just hit pause. Like
we got a long way to go. We got a lot of ground still to cover. There's a Heisman Trophy ceremony. There is probably among the least anticipated renewals all of a sudden of the Indiana-Kentucky series. There is a big thumping and crying in the background of my house, so I probably need to go make sure no one's broken a bone. But we've got a lot more. We'll be back midweek. We'll be talking a lot more about just where Indiana is, how Indiana is going to handle this layoff. Obviously, we'll get more details as they become available on Rose Bowl. I've already gotten a bunch of people asking, like, what's the ticket situation? What's the travel situation? I'm sure we're going to see a ton of you out in LA. It's going to be an awful lot of fun. For now, he's Mike Niziolek. I'm Zach Osterman for the Herald Times, for the Indianapolis Star. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching. And for those of you who never thought you'd see it, from Mind Your Banners, congratulations. Indiana won the Big Ten championship. We'll talk to you soon.